I've had a relatively sheltered life in the sense that there hasn't been too many ups and downs, which is good. It's nothing that I can complain about. It also means that I also need to create certain experiences for myself to create some confidence within me. And I was like, okay, like I can go to college, I can be the same person, or I can do something that just makes me leave my comfort zone totally, have some skills that are softer so that when I go to college, I can make the most out of it because I know what makes me tick, what I'm interested in, and what I feel like is going to be important decades on.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of these kind of extended format interviews. I call them college winterviews because I'm interviewing my very successful friends. Today, we're joined by Hiroyuki Kuwana. We go way back. This is a real homie. We've been friends since 10th grade of high school. And now Hiro is pursuing a degree in engineering at Brown University. So I just wanted to rewind the clock a little bit, ask a few questions about high school Hiro. Then, of course, we'll talk about college Hiro, as well as, what Brown is like and what engineering at Brown is like. But first of all, Hiro, thank you so much for joining us from Japan. Do you mind introducing yourself to the kids, to the
For sure.
group?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, hi guys, I'm Hiro. I have been Kevin's friend for a very long time, as he mentioned. I don't know if OG Hobie, that is a great compliment. I don't know if I'm that successful, but I hope I can impart some wisdom, which will go far. And I hope that you don't make the same mistakes I do. But there's a fair amount. I think a couple of things that I think that Kevin and I have in common is that we both started companies. I started more of like an e-commerce thing, and Kevin is also started as home cooked. We also co-taught a FinFund course, our finance fundamentals course, and that was really fun. But I think mostly I'm just, I think that if anything, if probably most interest anyone in the audience is, I usually do a more of an unconventional lifestyle in terms of a lot of people that go to Brown, I guess, really don't do a lot of things that I've kind of done. So like take a gap year, usually maybe even do STEM. Actually, I'm not really sure about that, but I know Kevin's friends are very smart, so they all do that kind of thing and live life to the fullest.
Yeah, so Hiro is definitely an unconventional being, I'll tell you that. But before we get into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about high school Hiro. A lot of the viewers are in high school or about to enter college. So, what was that guy like? What clubs were you involved in? What kind of academic subjects were you interested in?
That brings me back, man. I was involved. I would put myself as weird because, in terms of the college counselor literally looked at me and they're just like, are you joking me? Like, is this a story? And I'm just like, I'm just interested in different things. So I was the co-head of the investment club. I was also a dorm proctor. Somehow I was also the head of the Buddhist meditation club. And I also taught American Sign Language on the side. Yes. Like, how do you put this all into one story? It's very hard. I understand. And it kind of made sense. Also, I was also doing the business board at the Exonian. I was the head of communications, I believe. I was honorary co-head of the Jewish Society, and what else was there? There were just like other things that I just kind of forgot. But let's put it this way: I think those are the main things, and it just when you have so many, if you have a variety of interests, the pro tip is just make sure that it makes sense in your head while you're following them. It could just be that you have no idea why, but you just hope that the dots somehow form. And mine was international. I mean, the best way I could describe it was international relations. Like, I'm trying to look in the global level, and those are all the skills I need to like relate to different types of people. And like, you can always make something up. So that's one key thing that I learned later on that I wish I knew then.
Well, it sounds like a lot of your activities as well revolved around business. So you've been involved in business for a long time. I guess there's the investment side of business, like looking at it from stocks. When did you start getting into entrepreneurship? Was that at Exeter or at Brown?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that it probably was after Brown, I would say. I mean, I've always been curious about it, but I just didn't know where to start. I think like most people, it was just during my gap year, I was working at a venture capital firm in Japan just because I spoke English and Japanese. And then this one company said you could have an unpaid one. I was like, I'll take it because I'm just like, my skills are useless right now. And I was like, I could just pay me some like basic rent and I'll be okay. So that's how it worked out. And I just go interview people, just cold call people and cold email people who would start software as a service companies that are based in the US and Japan. One thing that it taught me is you could be intimidated by anyone, right? Be it Bill Gates or whatever, Jeff Bezos. If you see them on the streets, I mean, first, like, I remember the first time I saw Jack Ma in Tokyo, I was just like, oh my God, this is the dude, the Alibaba dude, who just a
This is the
legend, a living
Alibaba dude.
meme. Yeah. And then it just, you just have this point where you first are like in shock, and then I just took, I remember taking a photo, I just couldn't keep my hand still, but then it just, after a while, you're just like, it's just people, right? So any person who, if you like, once you get in the process of starting companies, or just in the process of, okay, I have an idea, I want to solve it, which is the most important thing. It's just, you have to first find a problem, and then you have to solve it, and then somehow you just hope that there is value involved. Because if you're not really sure, that might not be a bad thing, because that means that the market isn't there yet. If you're 100% sure, that might also be a very bad thing, because that means the market's completely saturated. But I mean, it could also work both ways. So I think that I just went through some personal things, like what exactly is my risk tolerance. I realized that like Kevin, mine's kind of high. I think out of our friend group, we're probably the highest, I would say, that we probably, I mean, from high school. And we just, I mean, we're the kind of people that just, I guess that it'd just be fine just seeing the different parts of the room, be like, okay, I guess that's normal. And then we just figure out what to do from there. So I think like that kind of mentality, like wherever you're placed in, that you'll be fine and you'll figure it out. You'll figure a solution is probably the most important thing in terms of going into entrepreneurship. And I guess like that, I realized that I had that mentality within me, and I'm just like, I would rather do that and then make pennies or peanuts than work at a successful place and then live a very safe life. And I was like, that is not something I would want to do.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that takes a lot of self-awareness. At what point did you figure that out? And you're like, this is my truth. Being an entrepreneur and taking these calculated risks, sometimes engaging in so-called speculative assets. Hiro and I have both played around with crypto.
Oh God, with crypto.
Meme stocks. Yeah. But yeah, walk us through that a little bit. Like, how did you figure that out about yourself? I think that's something that a lot of young people struggle with.
So one of the reasons why I went to boarding school was because I wanted independence. And I think that the key thing that's, if you take away anything, especially, if you have parents that either maybe they have parents that are just like telling you to keep on going for education, to work hard. I mean, I think that if you're watching this, that's basically you, is that you need to have room where you need to fail. And not in the sense of some kind of, magic trickery book of just someone trying to sell you something, a book where they're teaching you how to fail. No, not like that. Just being okay, going up to somebody and just being rejected, or just not being afraid to have someone say no to your face. And I think that's one thing that I was not really comfortable when I was in high school. I was more like a pacifist, I would say, when I was in during my I would say the middle of my high school years. And it reached a point where Kevin and I had a rough time, because I would rather keep the pace, and then I would not confront him about, there's this one stupid small issue. Looking back, it's hilarious. But we'll go into that if you want to. But it's those kind of things where I just rather keep the pace than break it. And I just realized, like, this is something that I know long term will frustrate me. I can't do this. I was always known as the nice guy in high school, and I'm like, I don't mind being nice, but it's like, I can't live my own life, and I can't feel like I have the freedom to experiment and live something that I would be true to myself if I kept doing that. So I think it just started from that, which is being able to know who I was, and being like, just saying, like, I've had enough in terms of like trying to maintain the peace. I just want to be able to say, like, look, if I don't like someone, if I really care about them, like, they will tell the same thing about me, and I will tell the same thing about them. And just really, at that point, started going uphill. And yeah, I think that the US is probably a great place to just start off, since it's one of those cultures where you're not exactly punished for being yourself. And I would just have time for yourself. And I think that it's easier said than done. So one way I would do this is have a way where you're just outside of parental, I guess, supervision, or somewhere where you don't really know too many people, and just try to live there, try to make some money, try to do something where you're just a little outside of your comfort zone, and just figure out what ticks you, because you'll figure out so many things stress you. But out of those things, it's like you'll just cut down bit by bit on what exactly some stresses will be stressors, because they actually matter to you. And you'll figure out the things that are essentially BS, and then things that aren't. So I would just recommend doing that.
Wow, Hiro is dropping a lot of wisdom. Okay. Wow. I want to respond to some of these points. This is fantastic. One, yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree with a lot of this. I think that one of the key insights is, right, like as a kid, when you're growing up, like your parents know everything about you when you're like 0 to 10. And then there reaches a point where you start to know more about you than your parents. But Hiro says, guess what? We can add like jet fuel to this process by basically throwing you into the middle of Zimbabwe or some foreign country where you're going to be faced with like challenges you've never met before, and you're going to learn more about yourself. That's, I think, one really key takeaway for you guys. That is why travel, like we are both such huge believers and proponents of traveling for that reason of not just like, oh, let's go and see the Eiffel Tower. It's not like sightseeing, but it's much more like experience and developing that keen self-awareness. And then the second thing that Hiro mentioned was just evolution from nice guy to Hiro is still very much a nice guy, but I think now I would say, Hiro, you've grown in the sense that you're much more, I think, confident in your own unique identity. A lot of our friends are like, Hiro's like maybe probably our weirdest friend, but they say that in the most loving, cherishable way process. And I just read this book. In fact, it was called Models by Mark Manson. Strangely enough, it was a dating advice book. And it talks a lot about how, I know, right? How
but but one thing is Kevin has a girlfriend, I don't. So just know that he's succeeding because the books are working.
Hiro is succeeding too. So this book talks about how important it is to polarize people when you first meet them, rather than just trying to conform and use very like same tactics, same pickup lines, same entries, same approaches. It's much more important to polarize people. And what do I mean by polarize? Like they will either like you or dislike you. And you actually kind of want to figure that out as quickly as possible so that you can move on. So I think that in the sense that Hiro and I have both found cases where, sometimes we come off too strong or we polarize people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that in a sense, it also signals our growth. So those were some really great insights, Hiro. I'm sure like high school Hiro and Kevin would have loved to hear that, actually.
I wish I knew that. But at the same time, I don't regret it just because it's just so many things that you look back. I feel like if you look back and then you're just like, wow, like I was like this 5 years ago, you're at a good place. That's all you need to say. It's like if you look back and then you wish you were what you were 5 years ago, you're doing something wrong. That's all I can say.
For sure, dude. Well, I think this is a good segue into talking a little bit about this transition period, your just one-of-a-kind gap year from Phillips Exeter Academy to Brown University. So let's walk through it, and maybe you can just explain your logic. Like, what made you want to do a gap year? What did you do during this gap year? How did you do it? Yeah, tell us about your experience.
So one thing is that in college, at Exeter and boarding school, one thing I've always did is I looked up to Kevin, and I was like, Kevin is an amazing dude because he was charismatic as hell. And I was like, well, it's like I haven't had that experience, but I mean, it's just one thing I've noticed that one thing I knew about some students at Exeter was that I've had a relatively sheltered life in the sense that there hasn't been too many ups and downs, which is good. It's nothing that I can complain about. It also means that I also need to create certain experiences for myself to create some confidence within me. And I was like, okay, like I can go to college, I can be the same person, or I can do something that just makes me leave my comfort zone totally, have some skills that are softer so that when I go to college, I can make the most out of it because I know what makes me tick, what I'm interested in, and what I feel like is going to be important decades on. So one thing I was always curious about was the environments, was entrepreneurship. And I took a job doing classic or non-NGOs, so nonprofit work with the Age Conservancy, which is essentially, I had a machete, I would wake up at 3 a.m, I would go up the mountains, and I just whack, and then check the fences, and I'd be like, okay, the fences are good. There's no boars coming in this nature preserve. I was like, that's a good day. And I was like, that isn't exactly what I like. Some people love it. I actually respect so much that people love it since you're essentially surrounded by nature all the time. You're living your camp dream, right? Of just being in the jungle, almost like an Indiana Jones lifestyle for some people. For me, I just realized I am a homebody, unfortunately. Even though I do love going out and everywhere and just like doing adventures, like I realized that wasn't for me. And I think that's one thing, which is sometimes realizing what you're not into is one of the most important things that you can get out of a gap year. And During the gap year also, I did travel to different places, and I was hugely influenced by my budget. Not in the sense of, because I was always investing money when I was little, I had enough, but I was like, okay, my mindset was I can have the little amount of money I have invested. Like every dollar I got, every $20, like I wouldn't even spend it on a game. I just put it in investment stocks since I was little, and I was like, I had no idea why. I just liked watching money grow, like simply put, because I played little video games like SimCity, and I just liked it growing because then you can build bigger things. I was like, but what exactly is that bigger thing, right? You could wait until you're 67 years old when you have millions of dollars, broken legs, most likely arthritis. Some people don't, but it's going to be different climbing Machu Picchu when you're 67 versus 20, even though I've never done it. But it's like climbing. The one thing I've done there is backpack the Himalayas in India when I was 19 years old, and I was like, that's something that I know that I can't do when I'm 70 or something, right? And I think that was kind of like the thing is, would I rather die with money or would I rather die with experience? And I knew that experience would most likely lead to any kind of wealth, be it financial or be it happiness in terms of long-term life. It just made a lot of sense for me logically. And whether I had, I think that there's certain people who would be considering it a gap year in terms of, would it be important for me because I didn't get into college? I was lucky enough that I did get into college, and then I had a year just to as a backup plan. And as some people probably are applying during the gap year. And I think that one thing that gap year does is that because there's no exact roadmap, it does strengthen your essay because you do experiment with different things, and it does add a little more character to any essay or any type of writing that you do. So I would totally recommend even on that front if you're considering it.
Yeah, I remember being so jealous of Hiro's gap year experience. Like this man would tell me, "Hey Kevin, like I'm at the Nature Conservancy in Hawaii, just chopping down things with my machete." Next thing you know, he's in Japan doing VC work. After that, he's in Spain. He picked up a little Spanish girlfriend, and he's doing marketing work using Google Translate. And then next thing you know, he's just flying between like several European countries. I mean, like how many countries or cities did you visit during your gap year? And
I was
if you could,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue.
Oh, my next question would be like, and what were some of your favorites? What were some of the like craziest stories or experiences that you remember still to this day?
Oh man, there's so many, but 20 there were I probably went around 20 plus countries. I don't remember. I think it was around I think it was around 20, but one of them I did go to Kevin, which was Thailand during the time. Crazy stories. Well, there's a couple. One of them is I was on a plane, and so the plane essentially caught on fire, and we had to make an emergency landing in Bordeaux, France. Another one was I did have a machete. I had a machete accident where it cut an artery, and I had to climb up and down or down and up a gorge to get a helicopter rescue. And I was like, this is kind of cool. Like I've never had that before. um, but I was just kind of joking because I felt so bad for the guy who was with me, since he had to do a lot of paperwork. And I was like, I was more worried about the paperwork than like my what's it called, artery being cut and just my finger turning white. And I was like, oh, the paperwork for this must be hell, must be so bad. But there was also a time when I was doing something called couch surfing, which is when you just sleep over at random people's couches. It's fun. It's very interesting. You could, if you're a female, I would definitely recommend it just to do with females, and you have a higher chance of a female responding to you in different, what do you call it, groups, than if you're just male, because sometimes like females trust females a lot more, which makes sense. And I think that's one thing I would definitely think of, regardless of gender, regardless of where you come from, because it just teaches you that most people just want to help out other people. I think that Kevin and I are both altruistic people, so I think that also helped reinforce it for me. But during this time, there was a time when I did drink absinthe, and I woke up in a random house. I had no idea where I was. It came from like a long line of Polish artists, and it was the youngest person, and he made like some homemade absinthe that was from the Soviet era or something. And I just remember trying it, and I was also with the person I was couch surfing with. We were looking at different abandoned warehouses. One of them, what's it called? Just along this road in Krakow, and just going down this field. It was really cold day at 12 in the night, and just like slowly drinking until just waking up, and then I just realized someone's making me breakfast. I'm literally in a storage room, just surrounded by all these mannequins that are staring at me. Oh yeah, and then there's the story of the, what's it called, the the plane. But essentially, what was happening was I did fall in love with a girl, and then she was in the UK. She didn't. I mean, it was like one of those one. It was just one of these. Whenever you go to a new city, just one of those things where I just fell in love with her. Kevin's had that in Argentina, but I think that I had it, and I was talking to her, and then it all worked out, and then I just had to leave because I went back to the States, and then we just kept texting, and I realized when I was in Madrid, I was like, that's not too far from the UK, so I told her like I was going to visit her, and then when I did, the plane lifted off, obviously. British Airways, one of those fancy planes, because they didn't. There was Ryanair wasn't flying directly, so I was like, okay, I'll pay $80. It's like that was pretty expensive. It's still pretty expensive. I was like, that's fine, round trip, I'll pay it. And then I took a nap. I wake up, I see something glowing in the right side, and I was like, what's glowing? And it's just the engine is just orange. It's just pure orange. I was like, this is not. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it isn't supposed to happen. And it just turns off immediately, right? They just shut off the engine after just like a little spark in some ways, and then the captain, I thought nothing would happen. I thought I could just go back to bed, but then the intercom goes off, and the captain's like, and he's trying his best John Wayne voice. He's like, attention passengers, we're gonna have to take a small detour to Bordeaux, France. And then I was like, well, that's okay. I mean, everyone's just kind of upset, right, or pissed off essentially that we just have to go all the way down to Bordeaux and have a 2-hour detour just probably to refuel or something. That's what they're thinking. And I was thinking the same thing. So I thought it wasn't too bad. But then 2 flight stewardesses were just making sure that everybody had their seatbelts on. I was like, this is the moment when you're thinking, I wish I looked at those manuals that they tell everyone is mandatory, or the Exeter rows, because I'm like, I don't remember how I'm supposed to crash. I'm like, is it like this? Is it like bracing position like this? And I'm just worried because it's like one engine is okay, one engine you'll land safely. If the other engine goes, that's when you make frontline news on the next paper. So
wow,
that's one thing I did worry about, because I didn't really tell my family. Like at that moment, I just realized like if I died at this moment, no one would know because I didn't really tell my family. So I was like, one thing I always do is if I'm ever doing something, at least one person in my family knows exactly what I'm doing. So I kind of like made that decision after that. But anyways, those were some crazy stories.
Yeah, wow, nerve-wracking. Maybe that was a sign. It was you were trying to fly to meet this girl and the engine catches on fire. I don't know if it was like, I'm gonna overcome this challenge, or maybe it was like, yeah, maybe I should just stay in Bordeaux.
Hey man, I did buy her a bottle of wine. It did not work out, but it was all good because there was, as Kevin said, a girl waiting for me in Madrid. It was just a friend, but then it just turned into something better.
Yeah, this guy's Spanish was not so good, and then it got pretty good pretty fast.
And then it got terrible again.
That's how it is. That's how it is. So Brown University,
yes.
Hiro.
Yeah.
How did you get into Brown, and how did you decide?
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea how I got into Brown, if I'm completely honest. I mean, I think it's just a combination of, it goes back to the conversation before, which is, I think that I had the right grades. I was interested. Brown really likes a lot of people who are different or have interest in different things, so eclectic things. And I think that I was kind of the person who just follows different interests, and it just makes they're just like, yeah, like he's into Buddhist meditation, he's into business, he's into investments, he's also into the Jewish Society, he's also dabbed into proctoring, he's also was in varsity golf. I forgot to mention that I was in varsity golf, but it's really not a big deal because golf
was a very intense sport at Exeter.
It was so intense, golf. Yes. Varsity golf. It was so intense that but I'll be honest, as a former varsity golf athlete, golf is not a sport. But it's like, if you consider that a sport, guys, like please go on like a marathon. Like just put that on your bucket list, please. Because it'll just change your life in so many fun ways.
Which Hiro has done. He has run marathons. That's hilarious. Okay, so I guess the next follow-up question is like, why did you pick Brown? What about Brown appeals to you?
That's a great question. Well, Kevin always asks me this question because I did have a choice between Brown or Yale, and then I was thinking of, it's like, what's the merit of both? One has more name, right? Obviously, one is better known internationally, and all, but at the same time, it's such a high level problem to have. And I just consider it to be like such a high level in some ways. So I was like, okay, when it comes down to it, what was the best indicators that I had at the time in terms of which I liked better? And I think that's the deciding factor came down to the people, in the sense of I always try to put a lot of emphasis on the people. It's like, Kevin's a great dude. He goes to Yale. It's like, that's a great school. But at the same time, I didn't know many solid people at Brown, or who went from our high school to Brown. I was like, okay, the general trend is that there's a lot of people who cling and strive to the very top. I mean, Kevin's an exception, but those people who, I mean, I personally, I guess, didn't really match personally in terms of personality or values, went to Yale, or just who I didn't really connect with well went to Yale. But then people who I just really knew as genuinely friendly people, genuinely kind, and people who, I guess the best way to put it is put humanity before anything else, went to Brown from our school. And I think like that's probably kept my decision, mainly because those kind of traits are things that are very unique and something that you don't really want to sacrifice unless you didn't have them in the first place, which I guess, like, it's fine. I know that Kevin, I think that one of the great things about him is that he's very good at finding money. So it's just like Kevin, essentially, I mean, you probably have a video on the Yale admissions, so, and just like how you essentially did it for $0. But like that is a goal in by itself. But I think that for me, it was just the people was just the biggest possible thing for me. And I just knew that whatever I do, I just wanted that part of me to just always be alive and just be surrounded by that.
That is so inspiring and motivational. Maybe I should have gone to Brown. Now I'm really regretting the last 4 years of my life.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, good one. You have so many good friends, dude.
It was a good time. Yale, there were a lot of nice people at Yale. Some of them are not so nice, but
I've met some of Kevin's friends. They're very nice people.
Oh yeah, Hiro. Yeah, we made like a little habit, because as it turns out, Brown and Yale are not that far away. I think it was like a 2-hour bus ride. So I would go to Brown at least like once a semester, and then Hiro would come to Yale once a semester, and we had a blast. Those were some really nice.
Yeah. And then nice Kevin would always take me to some parties, and I'll be like, I have no idea what's going on, but I guess this is fun. I'm like, this is fun. Anyways.
I had fun at your parties too. You become quite the host. Hiro knows how to bartend a little bit. It's alcohol and sugar, pretty much. You can't really go wrong with that combo.
You can't go wrong. It's so easy. It's so easy. Step 1, pour sugar. Step 2, alcohol. Step 3, give. Like it's. I was like, what could be so difficult? Like anyone can do this.
Hilarious. Oh my gosh. What was my next question? Oh, engineering. Okay, Hiro. So now you're an engineer in Brown, which I think is quite unique. I don't think there's too many engineers, and the type of engineering that you've picked is also a little interesting as well. So maybe you can tell us about that. What made you choose that major, and what is it like being an engineer at Brown?
The interesting, what he's referring to is it does make my major is environmental engineering, and the greatest thing about that is no one knows what it is. Everyone asks, what is that? Which is great, because that means as a conversation starter, you can always be like, well, let me tell you. Everyone's like, I like environment. It's like environmental is hip these days, so they're like, I like environment. I'm like, I bet you do. It's like, and then I tell them what I do, but it's like the best way I can always describe it, environmental engineering, is you have to consider it as in a I like to think of engineers like, what can they do in a post-apocalyptic setting, right? And I'm like, I can treat water. That's pretty much it. Like, I mean, like, I could also do a couple things, but it's like, when it comes down to environmental engineering, I could also know different technologies, right? So it's like, if you need power generation in terms of solar power, wind power, just those kind of technologies, I can explain how semiconductor, there's different, I mean, the semiconductor wafers, the silicon wafers, right? Technically speaking, how they go from a molecular level and how they work exactly into operating into your house and then giving you electricity. And I can also explain how pollutants, if you put in river water, right? How do you make sure that the river water is going to be clean with going through different types of layers of filters? And I mean, those are really fascinating questions for me, because I'm like, I love water. And I can't live in anywhere that's a desert, right? Because I just don't like that. So those are a couple things that you study environmental engineering. Why is another interesting question. I think that looking very long term, it was obvious that any type of environmental field was going to be in huge demand from a very business perspective. You could look at it from a mechanical sense. You could obviously look at space and say, space is very important. It's like, that's fair. But I do know that any engineering field, later on, I realized you need a lot of capital to make money on it. So in other words, you need to own the engineers or you need to own the engineers' time or become a owner of a company to actually make money. So that's one thing that I did learn when they ever talk about a new field being very profitable. You just have to be the owner. And usually those have high capital costs and you need a PhD in some kind of field. So that's one thing that I learned later on that I wish I knew beforehand. But at the same time, I think that engineering gave me a huge background in terms of the knowledge of infrastructure that I really enjoyed. I think that's the biggest thing is how to approach a problem in the real world is really interesting as an engineer. So rather than viewing it as, it's like, okay, we need to get from X to Y. And I'm like, okay, so if we need to get from X to Y, what exactly components do we need? How can we break it down into smaller steps? What can each person provide into their specialties? And then how can we just execute it so that it most likely will finish before this date? And then we'll have, so it's almost like a project management way of thinking about different problems. And I think brown engineering isn't very well known. So usually people who do it just do it because it's just interesting for them. So they have the most fascinating people and the most down to earth people that you could ever imagine. I think that, in any field, it's like if you become friends with an engineer, most likely they're just really down to earth or they're just really interested in engineering and they just do it because of that reason. So I think that it goes back to the people again too, which is why I stuck with it.
That's also so motivating to hear. So it sounds like environmental engineering has a lot to do with renewable energy. As I've heard, sometimes it's related to like waste management, dealing with pollutants.
Yes, 100%. There's so many things. I mean, I was lucky because I could do whatever I wanted with my major since it was so small. Now it's like become more set, but that's huge. That's a huge component, which is a lot of pollutants. And I think like that is still something that most people, if you learn more about it, it's one of those things that is kind of depressing because you're just like, wow, everywhere I go is polluted essentially. So you really don't, it just made me really pessimistic about owning land. And I'm like, I don't want to own land. It's like, it's polluted. I have to deal with that. I have to deal with that by law. And then I'm like, I don't want to do this. So you're right. It is a lot. It is a fair amount of treating groundwater and then looking at different pollutants, which I think is interesting because I think that there will be huge demands for governments to just tell people like clean up these areas. It's kind of the classic thing of environmental people do make a lot of money too. So if that's into consideration, I would not be saying bad for that.
Gotcha. So diving more into the nitty gritty, like what does a typical day in the life of a brown engineer look like? So what's your schedule? How often do you study? How difficult are your classes? That sort of thing.
Okay. So, no, that's such a good question. So a day in life, I think the best way to tell you is, so I would just give you a day before COVID, since I think that's the easiest way to put it. And just like, imagine it's a Sunday. The day before is a Saturday, obviously. But I wake up and it's like, I might have attended a party. I might have not have. That goes on till maybe 1 or 2 a.m., which is pretty normal. So I wake up around, let's just say 10, right? And I don't exactly remember, since it could have been a great party. It could have been I just went back home and I just watched a movie with my roommates and just chilled with them, and I just stayed up until 12:30 or something just watching that movie. So it could have been either of those things. And wake up 10 a.m. I go for a run. Usually I walk at this beautiful area called there's this East River bikeway, which you can. I was training for my marathon over there, but you can go probably 15 miles one way, which is around it's around 25 kilometers for those international units. And you could just keep on going and then just come back. But during the fall is the most absolutely wonderful foliage that you could ever see, just because you have the river, or essentially the ocean, by the side, and then there's just falling red maples on your left side, and just kind of jog while feeling the light fall breeze just go by you without even worrying about anything else. And then because it's Sunday, there's in the AM, there's no one there except for a couple of people who are also working out during the time. And I come back, it's around 12. I do a couple, I mean, this was back in the day, so I would be working, an hour or an hour and a half on my business and also eating lunch at the same time, probably 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours doing some homework. And afterwards, I would, there would be a couple events, sometimes in the Providence local area. So I would go either to an art museum because it was free for any student who was a Brown student to go to the RISD Museum, which is probably the second best museum right next to Harvard, or maybe the best depending on how you want to portray it, because it does have Picasso, it does have different types of modernist paintings, also classic Greek things, and also very like Japanese art is also in the exhibit. So I was so many different types of art, and you could just go in for, especially as a student, for free. So I was like, I might as well go in and spend time with there, maybe with my girlfriend at the time, and we just like talk about different things, whatever's going on with their life. While looking at it, maybe we would go to the Providence waterfowl, which is almost like a Venetian-inspired water event where they just have a flame. And I think Kevin did go to one of those with me. I'm not really sure though, but I don't know, maybe not. But they have like a little bonfire. It's almost like a bonfire of vanities where they have bonfires in the middle of the river, and then there's just gondolas just going by, and they just kind of watch time pass and just talk about dreams with your friends. Maybe go up the hill, have dinner at Den, which is a classic place to go with students. It's like this Korean American style barbecue area, which is, if you ever have a chance to go in Providence, I would 100% go because it is so good. Right next to Eastside Pockets. Anyways, those two places. If you anything in the interview, this is the most important thing. And I think afterwards, either I would probably just check the liquor inventory just to make sure I have enough for next week. And if I didn't, I'd just be like, well, I guess I'm going to go buy more. And I guess I would just do all of this, right? Which in in hindsight, isn't the most busy, crazy study that I could have ever imagined. It's a couple hours of studying here, couple of studying there, just enjoying time with friends. And I did this as an engineer, so I have very, very little regrets in the sense of what I disliked about it.
That was, I mean, that was phenomenal. I felt like I was at Brown, living your life. Wow. Okay. The last question for today, I mean, this was probably my favorite interview so far, and I would love to have you back on this little show where we have like 100 to 200
I don't know how
viewers.
much I can provide, but I hope
next time we should totally talk more about business, entrepreneurship, crypto. I think we could definitely have a longer conversation about that, and especially how to approach it as like a young person, as a high schooler.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
But my final question for you today is, Hiro, do you have any long-term career / like personal dreams and aspirations? Like, what is your 5-10 year plan?
I have no idea what I'm gonna do in 5-10 years, but I can tell you this: I want to go to space as one of them.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Oh, really? Oh, you didn't know that?
Yeah. If you have an extra ticket, please take me along.
Yeah. Okay. Don't worry. If you have if Kevin has an extra ticket, I'm just gonna be in a suitcase and just be like, "Oh, this is a pet hero. This is straight up a pet hero. Don't worry about him." That's awesome. I'll just tag along, or one of you students.
I'll take my girlfriend and I'll put Hiro in the suitcase.
I promise I'm quiet. So anyways, I personally, it's such an interesting question for me. It's like, what are my long-term goals? But I think one of them is go to space, and that's like the childhood one, right? It's like, you have to always have one childhood dream that could be dumb, but still goes on with you. It's like, if you want to be a firefighter, like, sure. I mean, just blast water. Like, that's kind of fun. Not gonna lie. Like, that seems really fun. Just still having your dreams. Just volunteer for the fire force. Like, that's still a fine goal to have, and that's very noble. I think that's nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. Or what's it called? If you still want to help people in terms of like medicine. I mean, you could always be a registered nurse, or just become like an like a wilderness EMT professional with certain types of training, and then just do that kind of job, which is always fascinating. So always keep that like one small little goal that you have, and then just make sure that like that never dies, because that just, if you have that with you and then you just make sure that you just keep remembering that you had this, I think that it just works dividends in terms of what you do and what kind of things you play around with in your life. And the second one, I mean, this is more long-term, but I don't know if this is 5-10 years, but in 10 years, actually, this is another goal. We won't get to all of them, but I want to live in different countries that speak different languages for 3 months each for 3 years.
Mm.
So
Oh my
12
gosh,
countries in total, 12 languages.
that has been like a lifelong dream of mine as well. Maybe I'm gonna ditch my girlfriend and just live with Hiro. That sounds amazing. That sounds so great.
I'll just steal Kevin from his girlfriend. I'll just be like, we'll just be knitting and just be like, okay, we got to practice French today. I'll be like, oh man, got to create. But I mean, it's just so practical now because with the lifestyle that you could live, there's a lot of remote things you could do, different types of consulting work, but you just have to, work. I mean, I'm planning to work like super hard for probably like 6-7 years before I do that. But I mean, I will do it. And I think that you can always say that you will do something, but you just have to just know like what kind of goal, what kind of monetary amount that's necessary for that. And so, and once you create small goals to make sure you do that, or you just set yourself right so that it's possible to do this, just make sure that if you really like it, then have 3 ways of approaching it, each with their unique ways. But at the same time, if one fails and one door closes, then you'll just make sure that the other 2 will still be there. Now, if all of them close, I just like Hail Mary. I mean, just buy a lottery ticket. But like up to this point, I think that if you have it within the 10 years and it's a reasonable goal that's doable now, but then you would still enjoy it a lot more if you could do it later, then I would definitely follow those goals. I mean, Kevin and I could definitely do that now. Just we probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if we did it like 6-7 years when we have a fair amount of money in the bank, and then just have some money that just grows, and then we could just be like, okay, like we don't have to worry about budgeting too much as people. We could just enjoy a little more while we do this. So
even in like 5 years, I think we'll be in a really great position.
I'd say 5-7 years. I mean, that's not a bad position to be in. It's like when we're 29, 30, just like 28, 29. It's like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, 5 years. Wow. 5 years. 5 years it is.
5 years. Yeah.
5 years.
5 years is pretty. Oh, that's so exciting. Hiro and I will have been friends for like 15 years at that point. And this is really the guys, an advertisement for Exeter and Yale ? Well, I think that some of my closest friends. No, I don't think. I know that my closest friends were from Exeter. I mean, Hiro and I lived together. We gave massages to each other late night in the dorm. We hung out. We played video games, board games, everything you can imagine. It was just like growing up with a brother. So those of you who are thinking about boarding school, wondering what that's like, of course, this is the positive aspect. There are some aspects which were not as positive, but I think that the boarding experience and growing up with kids from all over the world was one of the most meaningful things that I could have ever done in my brief.
It was super fun, not gonna lie.
It was really fun.
I mean, just looking back, I think that you do have what's it called? You just sort of have selection bias or whatever. But I think that overall, you just look back and you're like, wow, there's some really weird people, which I do admit. Not in the sense of just like weird fun, just like, wow, you cannot believe that they have this value system. It's shocking in terms of how skewed they are, but it's really good because when you get to very high pressure environments, you're just like, I know exactly what makes these people tick, and you get a lot more used to it faster. So that could be a positive.
I 100% agree, actually. Like thinking about it now, I think it was a lot harder to read people's intentions in college, where like you don't have that level of proximity. I think like living with people and kind of seeing exactly how they operate taught you more about human nature. That sounds kind of like a grandiose claim, but I really do think it's kind of true. Like you interacted with not just you, but we both interacted with so many different personalities, and it's interesting to see, like you can imagine like how each of these people would respond to the same circumstance, and it definitely kind of sobers you up and matures you a lot faster.
Oh no, that's so true. I mean, I felt like I could just read people a lot better at Brown, and I just kind of what you're saying, it's like cut them out essentially if I just didn't click with them, because you just know immediately if certain people, I mean, certain people are very honest. Some people you could just tell are very honest, and some people it's like you can tell that they have a mask that they hide, and everyone has a mask up to an extent. I mean, obviously I do right now, but it's a sense of like how many of them are willing to admit the elephants in the room, and you're like, well, it's not an elephant, it's a donkey, so no one has to dress it. And you're like, no, there's still a donkey in the room. It's like some people will mention that there is something in the room when no one else does, and you just have to stick yourself with those people. It's like, and you just both laugh, and everyone else is like, you're like, hey, everyone else is stupid or just doesn't mention it. It's just like everyone else is blind. It's like, oh well, whatever, just have fun anyways.
Yeah, Hiro is quite good at reading people. And I think that has a lot to do with your travel experience as well. Like just interacting with so many people. I think the one thing that helped me too as well was sales for home cooks. I think I must have called at least, hundreds of people on the phone, and those
Oh yeah.
conversations and that real world experience definitely helps you out bigly. All right then, Hiro, let's stop here before it gets too late in Tokyo. So
Sounds
I would
good.
love to have you back on the show. We can talk about other questions. Maybe kids in the comment section below might have a few questions for you. So if you're down to
I'm
respond to
always active
those.
on Kevin's YouTube channel, so I will probably respond.
Oh, thank you. All right then. Take it easy, Hiro, and I'll catch you later. Thanks for joining.
Sounds good. See you, Kevin.